On Bloomberg Sound On, as we add the voice of Brock Long. He's now the executive chairman of Hagerty Consulting, but he was not that long ago the administrator of FEMA, the federal emergency management agency that is in the throes of dealing with this storm and the situation in Hawaii and what will likely be a very large supplemental funding request. Brock Long, welcome back to Bloomberg. It's good to have you. Do you agree with Brian's take here? This could have been a lot worse for Florida.
Well, I think the worst case scenario would have been this if this event had gone into Tampa and Pinellas County. I think that the citizens living in and around that area should be very aware that they got missed by this storm. It went in pretty far to the north, but they still got 4 to 6 feet of storm surge. So imagine what would happen if it was a direct hit. But the most important thing is this storm is definitely not over. And Idalia is a reminder that not all storms are coastal events. While we're worried about storm surge, and storm surge has the highest potential to kill the most amount of people and cause the most amount of damage, this system is trucking through at 20 miles an hour through South Georgia, headed up towards South Carolina and North Carolina. And with that, anybody that is living near where the center of circulation is going to pass is going to experience hurricane force winds. And I worry about the construction standards of some of the homes in some of these like South Georgia, South Carolina, and some of these areas. They're going to see tremendous damage inland, and it's definitely not over. This is going to be a pretty sizable event for FEMA.
So we're not out of the woods yet, literally, as this heads inland to Georgia. The other problem, I'm sure, Brock, is that these people were not told to evacuate like those on the coast were warned repeatedly by officials in Florida.
Yeah, so the main reason that we issue evacuations in the emergency management arena is, again, for storm surge, right? So while storms are classified by wind intensity, the storm surge, again, has the highest potential to cause the most amount of deaths. And in this case, 16 feet of storm surge coming into the Florida Panhandle, and that doesn't include another 3 to 6 feet of breaking waves on top. Obviously swallows people up. And I've always said the storm surge is the unforgivable hazard associated with hurricanes. Very few people live to tell about what their experience was like going through storm surge. When it moves inland, the goal is if you're not in a facility that can withstand hurricane force winds, then you don't have to go very far, but you can shelter in place in other homes or other facilities that may be opened by local officials that can withstand the winds, that are built to a higher standard. Florida's done a great job with building codes. Other states, could step up their standards, to make sure that in the future we reduce the impacts of these things. But that's what we're looking at right now.
A lot of folks have been watching Governor Ron DeSantis closely. He's no stranger to storms, remembering, I believe it was Ida last year that we saw him deal with, but he's come off the campaign trail to manage it. Is that necessary for the governor of a state to make that effort? Does he actually need to be there, or could he have orchestrated this from somewhere else?
No, absolutely. Governors, all disasters are locally executed, state managed, and federally supported. So it's not FEMA's disaster. FEMA's, while it's looked at as 911, it really isn't. FEMA is designed to support a governor's actions when it comes to events like this. FEMA, again, is there to to help state governments overcome any gaps or to support major missions like search and rescue and debris removal, those types of things. But the governor being there and taking charge is exactly what any governor should be doing, and putting forth their command and control. They are the chief executive for their state when lives are in danger and when lives are going to be, altered as a result of this. They need to be, front and center, and that's what you're seeing.
I guess we're going to add Brian Kemp to that list as well if he's dealing with some damage in Georgia. Brock Long, there's a big conversation about funding here in Washington. I'm sure you're well aware of it. The Biden administration will likely have to make a pretty major request for supplemental funding to handle what's happened in Hawaii, of course, now in Florida and the Southeast, and what might come next. The line that we've been hearing is just, one hurricane could make the difference. And we've had a couple of events here. Does this look like the right amount that FEMA needs in terms of resources that's coming from the White House?
Regardless of this current hurricane, FEMA needs the funding. And most citizens have no idea how busy FEMA is from day to day. And Right now, FEMA has 23 joint field offices spread across this country. Some are physical, some are virtual, but they're working over 75 different disaster declaration requests that are currently open across. It's not just Maui, it's not just this current hurricane. 75 different disasters are going to be impacted by the lack of recovery dollars. And what FEMA has to do with the disaster relief fund is they have to estimate by each quarter, fiscal quarter, they have to estimate how much money is likely going to go out and be obligated on behalf of local communities and state governments to help them, affect the long-term recovery, which takes years. And if I read the disaster, the disaster relief funding report that they put out most recently, they estimated over $2 billion was going to be needed to, administer the recovery needs at these local levels. And that was before the Maui wildfires and this new hurricane. So Congress has got to step up. They need to pass a clean supplemental and get the funding to Deanne Criswell, the administrator of FEMA, and give her all the tools she needs in her toolbox that are necessary to handle not just this event, but all the events.
I'm sure you worry about ideas of this getting bogged down, and it could. The White House needs money for a lot of things. The government has to be funded. You've got a war in Ukraine. Is this something that should be handled as a standalone issue, or you worry that it gets bogged down into a lot of other things? I know you're not a political analyst, Brock. I don't want to make you one, but you do know the resources that FEMA needs.
Well, I've always thought that the future of FEMA should be one that's politically neutral. It should not be a political animal by any means or be brought into politics. I mean, we're talking about people's lives and the viability of communities before, during, and after disaster. So I would hope that we could find another way to work out other issues, whether it's Ukraine or other funding that's on the periphery of this DRF funding, get the money in the coffers and help FEMA out. Because what happens is that FEMA's had to move to immediate needs funding, which means that the only money going out FEMA's doors right now is dedicated to life safety and life sustaining missions. So all of the communities over the past couple years that have been through, disasters like Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Ian, Hurricane Irma, all of these other hurricanes that have occurred in Florida, for example, the long-term recovery dollars come to a screeching halt. And it backs up projects, major infrastructure projects or, different things that need to be done to help a community fully recover or become more resilient for the next event. And that's what's going on here. So, again, I think it's got to be a clean supplemental, get it done, get Deanne the money she needs. But there does need to be a greater conversation about the future of emergency management and the way that we do disaster declarations. I don't believe that the current system incentivizes proper land use planning, states that implement stronger building codes, or properly ensure their public infrastructure, which we all depend on.
We haven't talked about California in some time. It was 2 weeks ago, we were looking at historic flooding in Palm Springs. Brock, there's an element of this story, and not a lot of people want to talk about it, not everybody does at least, involving climate change. And I wonder your thoughts on this, if this is going to become more severe in areas not used to this type of weather every year as we go forward.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that are taking place here. I mean, I believe in a changing climate. I also believe in climate variabilities. There are different cycles that impact the severity of disasters or the frequency of disasters, such as thermohaline circulation or El Nino or La Nina. And, it's a changing climate coupled with climate variability, coupled with we got a lot of people living in vulnerable areas and, with a lack of building codes, a lack of land use planning. And so it's a culmination of many factors that is playing a part here as to why disasters are getting worse.